Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the February meeting of the Data Advisory Commission. If you can you please put your name and affiliation into the chat? And please make sure to chat with everyone, not just hosts and panelists. So folks that are tuning in that are not panelists can see as well. Thank you very much. I hope everyone stayed safe and warm during this crazy snowstorm. I live near the Providence area of Rhode Island, and we got upwards of 38 inches. So it is really fun being snowed in. Our street still has yet to be plowed, so we are hunkering down for the time being. If anyone has any crazy shoveling stories or snowblower stories, please feel free to share them all. Thank you so much for starting to add your names and affiliation. And my understanding that we are scheduled to get another snowstorm to add to the 38 inches that we got. So bring it on. Commissioner, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining.
Good afternoon, everyone. Looks like we're still loading up our members. Just coming in from clearing the last of the snow.
All right. Yes, Michelle, being home with snow day kids, I feel that very much. I have a feeling our childcare program is going to be closed all week.
Oh, you are in the travel ban zone, Addison.
Oh yes. We officially beat the record of the blizzard of 78. All right, we're looking pretty good on members considering between snow day kids and folks that are on vacation. I am going to pass it off to the commissioner.
Great. Thank you so much, Addison. And my first act as acting commissioner was to shut it all down. So kids will not go to school. I'll be very happy with the students. The students will be very happy with me, but I don't think the parents or the educators will. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. And just jumping on in the beginning of the meeting to thank you all for being here. And obviously, we are recognizing that many people are home with kids and other things. So we'll be as accommodating as possible. And mostly, I just wanted to thank you, but also just thank the team who's been working so hard to really build the data and analytic capacity at the agency. And I think we're seeing the benefit of that in many, many corners. I'm excited for today's discussion, which is going to sort of mostly focus around our workforce and sort of how we're understanding who's in the workforce, what we want for the workforce, where the workforce is going, but also dovetails really nicely with the agency's updated research agenda. So for any of you who saw our last board meeting, we had a terrific presentation that was related to what we're calling our research agenda 2.0, which is really the big questions we have around sort of where the system is, where the system's going, what we want to know about impact for kids. And what I'm really excited about in terms of the research agenda is that it is built on the foundation that this is much bigger than EC. That if we are able to find together an agenda about what we want to know about the early education and care system, that we can work collaboratively with partners across every aspect of understanding where the system is and where it's going, gives us an opportunity to look further onto the horizon for working with partners who maybe not budgeted on an annual basis, and to think kind of longer term as well as sort of immediate term around KPIs and performance that we want to know for this year too. So I'm going to hand it over to the data and research team, and this commission also has a responsibility to report annually. So we're going to spend some time at the end of the meeting also talking about your report or our reporting of your work. So thank you again for helping us continue to be data driven in our decision making, and thanks to the team for all you're doing to help be the source of good, strong, evidence-based decision making for the agency.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see all of you. Again, appreciate folks making time to join us in the midst of the weather craziness, and understand some folks who are here might have to sign off or come and go, and totally understand. I also just wanted to welcome Heidi Gold from the Executive Office of Education. Heidi, I don't think you've been in a commission meeting before, so welcome to the party. As Commissioner and Acting Secretary said, our agenda today is really going to focus in two areas. First, on talking about how to strengthen our understanding of the early education workforce through data and research. And second, a continued conversation from last time, which will also continue into our next meeting, on preparing the annual legislative report from this commission, and hoping to talk through some initial thoughts about draft recommendations, and share a timeline for next steps with all of you today as well. We're really going to begin today by sort of reviewing some of the current data sources that EEC has, and also open to thinking even more broadly to understand the workforce, sort of calling out where there are some gaps or limitations, and also talking briefly about opportunities ahead, which many of you are already aware of, including how some new technology systems will really help modernize how information is collected and maintained, and wanting to take advantage of that opportunity also from the data and research lens. We are going to also talk about a portion of our updated research agenda today, really diving into the workforce focused questions. And I'm curious to hear from all of you about sort of, again, what the priorities are from where you sit, and really helping us think through sort of the most urgent and impactful research that can really inform actionable policy solutions. And then again, in the second half of the meeting, we'll shift to preparation of the report and sort of the proposed structure and a set of initial draft recommendations. And then we'll spend a couple minutes at the end with approving minutes, which hopefully everyone received in advance via email. I'm going to be sort of in the background a little more today, but excited to turn to the team to dive in. And Adrienne, I think I'm going to turn it to you.
Great. Thanks, Amy. As Amy just mentioned, I'm going to kick off by talking a little bit about the primary data systems that EEC relies on to provide insight about the workforce. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jessie Murray, who leads our product team, who'll then talk about the IT modernization that's underway and the ways in which this modernization will address some of the challenges or limitations of our current workforce systems. So if we want to go to the next slide, great, thanks. So EEC currently relies on 4 primary data systems to provide insight about the workforce. On the top left, you'll see our Professional Qualifications Registry, or PQR, which contains data on all educators that have ever registered with the Commonwealth, along with demographic information about educator education levels, etc. It contains a vast amount of data on individual educators, but it has some significant limitations. There are a lot of duplicate entries. For example, when an educator registers themselves, and then a program also creates a record for an educator, there are meaningful duplicates. And it's also not clear from the registry which educators are currently working in the field right now, which makes it hard for EEC to use this information to understand the size and composition of the workforce. On the top right, you'll see the teacher qualification system, which we often call TQ. It contains data on all the educators who have applied for EEC certification. It includes many years of historical data, but the system is outdated, and a lot of the key data lives outside of the TQ system itself and is harder to access in sort of a digestible form, which makes it a little challenging to use this data for analysis. On the bottom left, you'll see the agency's learning management system, or LMS, which generates a lot of rich data on the professional learning that educators engage in over time. But it has limited integration with other EEC data systems. So the agency is not able to link what data we have from the learning management system with data on educators from other systems to better understand LMS participation by educator characteristics that are often collected in other data systems. And then on the bottom right, EEC collects data on the workforce via C3. I think many folks on this call are very familiar with the application and survey processes, but the agency through C3 collects data on the number of educators enrolled by program, the number of educators that have been hired and left over time, and then the highest and lowest wages paid by each program by role. But this data is collected at the program level rather than at the individual educator level, so it's harder to gain systemic insights through the data that's collected at the program level. So, as Amy alluded to, EEC is working really hard to modernize the sometimes fragmented way that we collect data on educators. And I'll turn it over to my colleague Jessie Murray to share some more about these efforts and these efforts in relationship to our educator and workforce data in particular.
Yeah, thanks for providing that initial context on kind of where we're coming from, Adrian. And I'll talk a little bit about where we're going. EEC we've often called it the educator portal or the ed portal. We're calling it the EEC professional portal to encompass the broad set of folks who will be in it. But we're hoping to go away from some of that fragmentation into more of a one-stop shop for a lot of these required workflows that educators need to go through as they interact with EEC. So right now we already have the portal up and running. Not everyone has had the need to get into it yet because the main workflow that is in there right now is the certification workflow. So if you are looking for a teacher, lead teacher, director certification, you can log into the portal. As we eventually move towards credentials, we'll do a transition from certifications to credentials in the same portal. But we also want it to be the main way that people register. So moving away from PQR into the professional portal. And as Adrian said, we want it to be deeply connected to the LMS. We really want this to not rely on, individual educators putting in their data in multiple systems, making sure they don't make typos, but instead having shared data elements and shared notions of who a person is, so that we can eliminate some of the difficulties in dealing with some of the existing data. So really, what we want this to be is where we have educator data. So how we'll get there right now, as I said, on the certification side, educators can already apply for certification. Supervisors also may have interacted with the portal by filling out the work experience verification form on behalf of certification applicants in the portal. There is a small update to this. We had hoped that we could announce already that we had the new learning management system, Strong Start, up and running through the portal. You all will likely appreciate the complexity of matching people's historic course completion data to new MyMassGov accounts in order to make sure that's as smooth a process as possible, that people can log in with a singular login to the portal and the new LMS, and that their course history is pulled through appropriately. That date is getting bumped out a little bit. We're looking at likely end of March or very beginning of April, but more to come on that front. But the next piece will be that we have, a single login, a single entry point to get into the learning management system that will be associated with, your certifications and your profiles. I see the chat. But this is not where we're going to stop. We are hoping to tackle a few additional pieces this calendar year at a very high level. We want to be able to pull registration into the portal so that we can eventually retire PQR. We want to think thoughtfully about that transition, ensure that, if people have information in there that they want to retain, that it can be downloaded, and that certain information can be migrated if appropriate. But ultimately, we want them to not have to, enter their name in 3 different systems and have a single interface that they can do this in. Additionally, we know that, some information around, what is the program name of the program that I work for. We don't need people to, type those in, again, risking typos, risking just manual data disconnects. And so we're hoping to have some very lightweight integration, pulling data from lead to source, what programs you may have, what programs you may be employed at, and be able to then associate, those educators with those programs, kind of going backwards as well. So being able to say, for a program, we know that this many folks have completed this training or are on track for this sort of professional development. As we go down the road, we want to do deeper integration. This, again, serves 2 purposes. One is just reducing the burden on the educator and the programs of that manual data entry and data accuracy. And 2 is just ensuring that everything keeps in sync across our various systems. So we're looking at kind of the preliminary registration and that roster mapping this year, but going to a more robust version of that in the next calendar year, where we may be able to do things like, if you're an educator, get a reminder that your BRC is up for, or your background check, sorry, is up for renewal soon. So we are working on that roadmap and fleshing it out, but I think we're going to be able to do a lot of deeper analysis and connections soon within the context of this one portal. I will hand it over to next folks.
Great. Jesse, before I take it back, do you want to, I think Kate asked a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to address it. I think Kate asked, could this be accomplished by incorporating drop-down menus? And I think she's referring to the integration piece.
Yeah, I think that could essentially be step 1 of, which is similar to what we have for the certification workflow, where you're, when you're filling out your work experience form, you can pick from a drop down that's sourced from lead. But I think what we're hoping to do is having a bit more, I think both that push from lead and that mapping back to, by a program, who are the educators associated with it, and being able to, look at the data in certain reports that way, especially for our licensors to be able to look at it from kind of a, who is everyone that I care about here? Have they done all the training that I would expect them to do? But yes, that is definitely a kind of first step, could just be a pull in the program list, make sure it's up to date with license status, et cetera.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. So Jesse just shared a lot about the user experience that is planned for the new professional portal. And I want to emphasize that we're both really excited about this user experience, and then also the new insights that the portal will help EEC and really the field as a whole unlock. There are a lot of policy critical workforce questions that EEC will just be able to answer with a new level of rigor and a new level of accuracy with the advent of the new portal. And we've laid out a couple of those questions here. For example, with the new portal, EEC will have greater insight into who makes up the educator workforce. So how educator characteristics vary by program and role. With the new registry function in the portal and the integration of the portal with LEAD that Jesse was describing, we'll have a much clearer picture about who's currently employed in the field right now and the broader characteristics from both the registry and the educator qualifications of those individuals. In the red, similarly through the role information in the educator portal and the new credential data coming down the pike, we'll have much more insight into how educators move across roles and programs over time, as well as how they move in and out of the sector over time. Most of the data that EEC currently reports on educator turnover and retention are appreciated the feedback last meeting about thinking about a more asset-based way to talk about educator turnover and retention over time. That data is really based on currently on program level reporting, which doesn't help us understand how individual educators with various characteristics are retained in the field over time and what that mobility looks like. And then finally, in yellow here, EC through the portal will be able to better understand the types of professional learning opportunities that educators are engaging in. And we'll also be able to link that data to other educator characteristics from the other data systems. So, want to emphasize here the ways in which we've been thinking about the educator portal as really unlocking new insights for EEC particularly, and for the field as a whole to better be able to understand the workforce. And many of these questions are laid out in the agency's revised research agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to Ashley White, our Director of Research, to share a little bit more about these questions and to lead us through a discussion about the workforce section of the revised research agenda. Ashley?
Thanks, Adrian. Hi, everyone. As Adrian mentioned, we have been, working to update and revise our research agenda. We published our original version in October, I think it was, of 2024, and we're really kind of proud of that first iteration as a way to kind of guide some of the research and data priorities of the agency. And took some time over the past few months to really revisit that research agenda and make sure that it was, reflective of kind of the existing policy context and sort of the priorities of the agency and priorities of folks external to EEC. So the process, I think, mirrored similarly to how we approached it the last time around, which is, engaging internal program staff to learn about kind of their priorities and their goals and the work ahead and how research and data could support that. And then also engaging with some external folks about the research agenda as well to make sure that we were sort of taking into account folks' perspectives and priorities outside of the agency as well. And so we recently announced that revised research agenda, which makes some, I think, really important updates. And I just to sort of add to what Adrian was saying, I think the real kind of connection from the research agenda to what we're talking about here today is around the research agenda being sort of the driving force behind the data that we want to collect and want to be able to use to better understand our workforce. And so there's absolutely sort of alignment between the researcher questions in the workforce side and connection to the professional registry and making sure that we collect the information that we'd like to be able to learn about and say more about the workforce. Outside of that, this research agenda, I think, really takes into account EEC's recently developed and updated strategic action plan. So there was a really intentional effort here to align that with the research agenda with those priorities and goals and the work outlined in that strategic action plan to make sure that the questions that we are asking are directly related to future or ongoing work at the agency and helping to support and move that work forward. We also organize the questions sort of based on kind of near term or more kind of feasible research questions and questions that may be more sort of longer term. And that was based on feedback from some external folks, particularly researchers who said, this is a really great list, but it would be really helpful to kind of know of this sort of list, what are the ones that you think you would prioritize, in the next 6 months to a year versus what might be a longer term project. And so we tried to articulate that on the research agenda so folks are more clear about that. We also added a new section of cross-cutting questions, so recognizing that a lot of the research that we want to do to inform our work, I think, span a bunch of different sort of departments within or units within the agency, but also across different agencies. So might span the different education agencies, but also might span, workforce or labor. And so wanting to create a section that really thinks about, some of the work that I think the E2C folks are engaged in terms of connecting and aligning our data across the different systems that government has. So those are just some of the updates, and folks can there's a sort of link on the slide, can see the research agenda, which is updated on our website, and also the board meeting from earlier this month goes into a little bit more detail about that process. The next couple slides here, seeing as the topic is workforce, wanted to highlight some of the workforce-related questions on our updated agenda. And the purpose here is, as I mentioned, these questions are really kind of based on EEC's focus and priorities and the work sort of as we see it right now and as we see it sort of ahead. But wanted to really give space to this group to kind of weigh in, as you're looking at these questions, to help us, also hear from you about what of these questions would be most important to you, what would be sort of a priority of these questions to answer, and then also, thinking about, are there any things that we should be considering as we broach doing research on these topics, right? Are there sort of things that we should be thinking about? Should we be designing the research in a certain way? Caveats that we should be sort of keeping in mind. So meant to just pause here and kind of get some reactions and allow you some space to kind of review these questions and share any feedback that you might have around, again, what would be most important from this list for you. And then again, if there's any sort of thoughts or considerations that you think we should keep in mind as we potentially embark on some research on these topics. And this is the first of 2 slides, so we can pause here and then maybe make space for the second slide as well. The other thing I would maybe just, I saw Michelle, thanks, put something in the chat, is this first slide is sort of thinking about collecting more information so that we can understand the workforce and its characteristics and their experiences. And then the next slide, which is sort of represents another section on the research agenda, is really about kind of the investments that we're making in the workforce and testing and evaluating and better understanding how those investments are impacting the workforce and what we can learn from that. I'm just reading Michelle's comment.
Ashley, maybe you can read that out loud so anyone
Sure.
listening can also hear.
Sure. So Michelle put in the chat that we'd love to explore the relationship between degree attainment and retention. As educators attain higher degrees, are they more likely to leave the field for public schools or other fields? I think that's a really, really a great question. I don't know if Adrian Amherst just put another great question that sort of builds off Michelle around related to this question about educator attrition. Is that data currently available systematically, or when the PQR exists, so the professional portal exists in its next iteration, will that sort of include a way to kind of capture sort of departures from a program or exits or transitions?
That's a great question, Ashley. Currently, we report on data collected via C3, via the C3 biannual surveys around, we ask programs the number of educators that have been newly hired in their program and the number of educators who have left their program by role in the past year. So we use that to understand educator retention but because it's collected at the program level, it sort of limits the ability of how much we can dig in to understand really who's leaving, what educator characteristics make an educator more or less likely to be retained in a program over time. And the portal data that Jesse was just describing, this linkage where we'll be able to link educators to the programs in which they're employed, will help us be able to better understand, our particular educators being retained over time. We'll be able to link that with their registry characteristics. And then it will also help us be able to understand too, when educators leave a program, are they leaving for another program, or are they leaving our licensed early education and care space more broadly? So I'm really excited about the opportunities and additional insights that the portal will bring in that regard.
Yeah, and I just want to again add, I think Michelle's question is a really great one, and I think is a key focus for us as well, is just trying to understand sort of what relationships or influences there might be for an educator to move to new positions, be retained, move up in the field. So I think that's really important for the agency to sort of better understand what those sort of points of leverage are in terms of influencing the career pathways and growth that educators have. So within ECE. Marissa, question?
Might not be a quick follow-up for Adrian, actually, but I know that right now compensation data is usually program level from C3 as well. Is that something you all are thinking about in terms of the portal, where it'll be individual educator data that's sort of like the primary way of collecting that in the future, or more built into the program level still?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think more on that to come over time as the roadmap for the educator portal sort of builds out and we can figure out what's sort of feasible there. But it's Marissa, it's sort of in the same bucket where most of the wage data that we use for reporting now is really at the program level, which limits our ability to understand, is a program increasing wages for all educators? Are the mix of educators in a program becoming more experienced, and therefore the program sort of the highest paid educator in a program is earning more than last year at this time. So really being able to, there's certainly a desire to be able to understand that at a more granular level.
Yeah, can I say something briefly on that? Just directionally, like the goal, and no promises on the details of the timeline on this, but there was a brief reference in Jesse's slide to sort of the first stage of this is to create a link between the educator portal and LEAD. So you can understand, so educators are connected to their programs. So the data actually would be available then at both levels if we can get the system to that point.
Yeah, 100%, Jocelyn. Thanks.
And there's been a couple more comments in the chat. So Kate, I see your comment, and absolutely, I think this is very much kind of in line with Michelle's point earlier, and sort of what I was trying to say in terms of understanding the drivers of retention can help sort of inform EEC about kind of the supports and ways that we provide services and supports to educators, and think about what programs need and what educators need to feel fulfilled and stay within their positions, but also grow in their careers. I want to go back to Victoria. You put a comment, you said would be potentially be interesting to explore the similarities and differences between the EEC workforce and educators in the K through 12 system, both in terms of educator characteristics and experiences, and also in terms of the systems and structures that exist to support educators in both those sectors. I think this is a really good point, and I would, if you feel comfortable coming off mute and just maybe kind of expanding a little bit in terms of where your mind goes in terms of like use cases for that information or sort of like applicability back to what the agency should be thinking about, uh, when gathering this information.
Yeah, sure. I just think there's often, comparisons that people try to make between the two systems. And I think really understanding um, how the EEC system is different, which I think we do in a lot of ways otherwise in the system, talking about the multi-delivery system um, and things like that. So I think being able to have a little more context when there's comparisons being made, I think would be really interesting and also could help kind of expand on some of the questions we have about folks that might move from one sector to the other and kind of what drives those decisions would be interesting to know.
Thanks. And Andrea, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, sort of building off of that, in addition to sort of K through 12, looking at the out of school time programs, particularly that serve age groups up to 12, K through 12, and both license exempt and licensed, because I think there's been some, sometimes I feel like comparing to the public school system is almost unattainable. But I think because there's so many other variables, the teachers union, I mean, there are a number of other things that enable that rate to get higher. But for those of us that do not have that, who have really been focusing on wages, I think it would be there'd be a more opportunity to use some benchmarks in the out of school time program, because I think there's been great strides made to increase. I don't know if you're seeing that on the C3 reporting, but I know within our organization, significant, wage increases in the last 5 years that I think we wouldn't have even thought of 5 years ago, reaching that level.
Thank you.
Also, just want to highlight that there's some actually initial research and analysis being done right now by some folks at Boston University. I see one of them is an attendee today, Pia, who is sort of doing a little bit more of a deeper dive into some of the data that's available on the early childhood part of the public school world from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, just to sort of understand some of the sort of basic characteristics of that part of the workforce, which I don't think has been maybe looked at in as much depth as sort of, PK to grade 12 as a whole. So it'll be interesting just to sort of see where what we know about that part of the workforce in conjunction with that new data that we will soon have available too, that will be even better on the licensed and Andrea, as you said, license exempt side as well.
Thanks. Thank you, Kate Marie. I'm just commenting that about any sort of connections or entryways between, after school to early ed in terms of the workforce and educators' career paths. Marissa put in a comment. Sorry, I'm going to read these aloud just so that folks on the stream have these questions.
Mute too, if that's helpful, Ashley.
Sure, yeah, that'd be
Yeah, save your voice.
Sure.
I was just saying along the lines of compensation, I think there's potentially a few educator characteristics that I wouldn't originally rank as like my highest priority, but they could have implications for policy decisions that you all make around educator compensation. So I'm thinking about like the number of hours that an educator might work per day or the months that they work per year. Family composition as well could be another piece. So some of those, I'll try and think of others, but I think there's a few that might be closely connected to determining sort of salary moving forward as well.
Yeah, Justine, could you go to the previous slide just so, Marissa, this is where we have the sort of characteristics and experiences. So just wanted to bring this back up because I think your question is directly related to some of these.
Yeah.
There was a hand up, but perhaps the person put it down or was sort of inadvertent, but want to make space. Oh,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I put it down while somebody else was talking. And something I am completely on board with all of this, the interest in retention. I think that that is really important and a big priority and how people come into these roles. I'm also thinking about the family childcare business owner landscape, and I imagine that, of course, they're included in this workforce, and I imagine that the outcomes for them and would look a lot different from educators in a center-based or out-of-school time type program or in a K through 12 system. So I'm also interested in the entry points for them too, similar to what Marissa was talking about. Do most of them start out in a center-based program and then venture out on their own, or what does that career pathway look like too? And how do they stay in business?
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ellen, for highlighting that. Heidi?
Love the conversation. One of the factors that research has shown to also impact workforce satisfaction is the ability to make decisions and within their own domain. And I'm wondering if there's a way to get at that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Heidi. I think, sorry, Justine, to make you flipped back and forth, but if was interested in this group's reaction to especially this last question on here, which I think is an attempt to, I think there's a lot of focus and rightfully so on compensation, right, as a important factor, but sort of what are those other um, sort of aspects of the environment or of job quality, which would, from your perspectives, be worth looking into further. And we've listed some of them there, but I do think that sort of maybe it's like efficacy or sort of autonomy, leadership opportunities.
You have
Heidi, that you're
leadership
speaking
there,
to.
which I think is really key.
Oh, we did. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
leadership
but
is there.
yeah.
But I think, I don't know, can noodle it, but maybe something explicitly even about decision making, I
Uh-huh.
think is people that can make decisions about their day or,
Sure,
their
sure.
career, I think has shown to be a powerful force. I can follow up. But I do love that leadership is there.
I know we're coming up on my or this section's a lot of time, and this was a really great uh, discussion. And appreciate everyone's thoughts, and also just want to say that I am here and available should folks have kind of additional thoughts or perspectives that they want to share offline, just in terms of again, things to kind of consider as we try to tackle answering some of these questions, and some things that you think we should be particularly paying attention as we embark on that work. So thank you for your time today, but again, just want to let you know that I'm available if folks want to talk, continue the conversation offline.
Ashley, I think there might be one more comment in the chat from Adam, who I think is multitasking at home. just if we could.
Okay, sure. Adam, feel free to come off mute, or I can try to summarize your question for the chat.
I'll try when I have it before I have to jump off. But yeah, I'm trying to keep track of who's speaking, but maybe a couple comments ago, it reminded me of the just idea of being able to track pipelines. I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly what is and isn't able to be disaggregated right now, but I'm just thinking about like, can we tell whether, say, like an FCC assistant is able to move up the ladder, so to speak, like and be like a lead teacher in a center, or like what other parallel pipelines exist in other places, just to be able to know what's working in terms of folks' career support, moving either like within the same setting or into a different setting.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an important one, and I think something that will be hopefully more doable in our future state than our current state. So definitely on our radar as we start to go from one to another. So I think we're going to sort of change hats a bit. Um, I think we sort of started to talk a little bit about this at the last meeting, but wanted to use the rest of our time today to get some input and discussion on what you all are hoping to see included in the annual legislative report that really is an opportunity to really synthesize both what the commission has been focused on and discussing over the meetings that we've had so far over the past year, as well as an opportunity to provide an update to the legislature on both sort of ongoing research and data infrastructure efforts, broader capacity building that's happening at EC and in the field more broadly. But importantly, this is not just a sort of summary document. It's also an opportunity to include some forward-looking recommendations. Again, we've currently framed them sort of for the agency, but they could be even broader than that. And again, the recommendations are really intended to guide sort of our future data and research strategy, help prioritize high impact investments, and really strengthen the ability to assess and respond to the needs of the system and children and families, which is sort of at the heart of the charge of this commission. In terms of timeline, we had a pretty high level discussion last time. For those of you who recall, it was a little while ago in October, just on some initial directions for recommendations to help shape the overall framework for the report and areas of focus. And it seemed like there was general consensus on the directions. But today we wanted to sort of go one step deeper and review a proposed outline for the report and some initial recommendations that we have developed to really help refine priorities and ensure that the report's aligned with the commission, what all of you would hope to see in it. Our goal, if all goes according to plan, is to be able to circulate a draft of the report to this commission in advance of our next meeting, which is at the end of April, to give you all a chance to take a look, process, absorb, and then at our next meeting, the hope would be for the commission to sort of discuss and formally approve the report with the caveat that following the commission approval, the report will likely go through some final internal review and approval before being submitted to the legislature. We're trying to come up with a process where we're doing some of the legwork, but again, want to have you all have a chance to really see the content and weigh in at a few points. And I think the commission is sort of early on in its journey. Again, as we sort of start looking to next year and priorities, we can also talk more about the process for moving forward as I think we get deeper into this work. So I think the next slide starts to talk through the goals, which I've already talked about. And I think I'm going to turn it to you, Adrian, to sort of give an overview of the recommendations that we have developed so far, as well as the outline of the report for any feedback.
Great, thanks, Amy. So in order to achieve the goals that Amy described, and then we're on the previous slide, we're proposing a report that is structured in the way that you see here. So we're proposing that the report start with a summary sort of the commission activities to date. So this will include brief summaries of the content that's been covered at meetings and really is meant to provide some additional context for the recommendations. And then we're proposing to include some additional content and context about the broader sort of early education care data and research space. So some content on the growth in the EEC data and research analytic capacity, the research agenda, the EEC partnerships, current EEC research partnerships, the increase in EEC public-facing data tools, and then a good chunk about the efforts that Jesse described earlier, efforts that are underway to modernize EEC data systems, both workforce data systems and family data systems. And then additional research infrastructure beyond EEC. And then go into the report recommendations, which we'll dig into much further in the next few slides. But before we start to dig sort of deeply into the recommendations and get this group's feedback there, I just want to pause for a moment and confirm that this seems like the right content, confirm if there's anything missing here or anything that you want to make sure is included in these sections that you don't see explicitly here. So I'm going to pause. We'll go in sort of detail in the next few slides around the recommendations and spend a good chunk of time there, but want to make sure that there's not any sort of broader context, contextual information that you want to make sure we cover in the report. I'm balancing wait time and making sure that you can't hear the tiny humans in the background behind me. So great. So if you want to go, Justine, to the next slide. We have focused, and you'll see this in the next few slides. We've focused and organized the proposed recommendations in the report around the 4 EEC research and data strategy areas. So identifying key questions questions and then data needed to understand the landscape. Access to data and analyses, public access. So this is where our KPI work and our research brief work lives. Improving data quality, and then streamlining data collection. So this is similar to what we shared in October. In October, we shared the recommendations sort of organized into these 4 areas, and we're proposing to continue that structure in the report. Justine, if you want to go to the next slide. So I'm not going to read verbatim each of these next slides, but I'll walk through at a high level the recommendations, which are similar to what we shared in October, but these have been fleshed out a little more, really incorporating the feedback that that this commission shared at the October meeting. So I'm going to walk through there are 3 slides, so I'll walk through each of the 3 slides at a high level, and then I'll come back to this slide with some questions so we can dig in more on deeper feedback. But I'll glide through all of the slides first so that you can see the full set of recommendations before we do that. So sorry, Justine, if you want to go back to the previous slide. So under the identifying key data and analyses needed to inform policy decisions, we've outlined a recommendation here around maintaining an up-to-date research agenda, a recommendation here around engaging in external research partnerships, really continuing and deepening those partnerships. A recommendation around measuring and tracking the metrics related to the agency strategic action plan, which we focused deeply on in our October meeting. And this one, this recommendation came really out of that work and the commission's work there. And then a recommendation around regularly assessing data needs and gaps, and thinking about where there's new data collection needed in order to meet those gaps. Justine, if you want to go to the next slide. Thanks. In the public access to EEC data and research, we've outlined a recommendation here around continuing to enhance our KPI dashboards. And we added some details here, hearing the feedback at the last meeting about also the importance of making sure that the underlying data are accessible. So we added that to this recommendation. And then also are outlining here a recommendation around continuing to develop the public-facing data briefs and other tools and resources beyond the dashboard. And then Justine, if you want to go to the next slide, thanks. In the improving data quality space, we are proposing a recommendation around improving data quality as sort of a focus of the new IT modernization work, the work that Jesse described before in the educator world and also in the family access space, as well as a recommendation around strengthening data quality in our current EEC system. So focusing there both on data quality as the agency is rolling out new data systems, as well as strengthening the data that we're collecting in current systems. And then also under streamlining data collection, a recommendation around streamlining collection for families to reduce administrative burden. And really we heard a lot of feedback at the last meeting about making clear in these recommendations the importance of being attentive to administrative burden for programs, for educators, and for families. And then we also revised this recommendation. We heard some feedback in the last meeting just about being really clear about that this streamlining, who this streamlining is in service of, and the importance of sort of recognizing our end users as the individuals who the streamlining is really meant to support and in service of. So those are the sets. There's 9 recommendations total, and would love, we can either go back to the first slide, or we can, if folks would find it more helpful so we can see each other, take down the slides all together. But we're really interested to hear whether or not these recommendations, to the extent to which they capture what the commission and the agency should be focusing on the year ahead, if there's anything missing, and then what we might want to elaborate on beneath each of these recommendations. So in the report, we envision not just including the recommendations, but also some sort of short paragraphs underneath them, and want to hear from you all if there are things that we'd be remiss not to include as we sort of elaborate out on these recommendations. And I put those questions in the chat for reference. Yeah, Amherst.
Thanks, Adrian. I don't know if this is really addressing your specific questions, but I'm just curious, based on the current state related to data quality, can you clarify whether the primary challenge with data quality right now is a limitation regarding how to reconcile different data systems, or is it a problem with collecting the type of information that's needed, or something else?
Yeah, I think to some degree it's all of the above. There are some data points that we collect across systems, and so we have slightly different truths about a program or an educator across various systems. There's also some places where we've been doing some thinking about adding additional validations to improve data quality. So a lot of our data is self-report, self-entry. And so thinking about what additional validations could we put in place, or even just sort of, pop-ups to say, hey, it looks like you entered XYZ. Is this what you intended to enter? So just thinking through ways that will help us to collect stronger data in some of our data systems while balancing and maintaining that attention to not wanting to put additional data entry and data burden on programs and educators and families who work with the agency on a daily basis. Does that answer your question, Amherst? I think the answer is like all of the above, depending on the data point or data system or question at hand.
Thank you. So I guess maybe to answer one of your questions, what should be elaborated beneath the recommendation? Maybe just maybe explicitly calling out that there's a balance between overtaxing programs for information and trying to ensure data quality, something like that.
Yeah. Thanks, Amherst. That's really helpful. Kate Marie, I see your comment about the how to each one, and yes, and that's, we're in the process of drafting and fleshing those out now, and would be especially interested if there are some where you think if there are hows under here that you would want to make really sure that we're attentive to and including here in the report.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, my kids are also home. That's why. Yeah, I think just to be careful, and this is probably the same thing that Amaris was just saying, is like
Yeah.
being really cautious that we don't get the how serves the recommendation, but it also is serving the end user, because I think we
Yeah.
could go so far in one direction where this becomes so burdensome that we have defeated the purpose of what not only this is, but like what the field is, and
Yeah.
and the purpose of serving kids. Are
Yeah.
we doing it a disservice by making it an administrative burden?
Yeah. Yeah. Kate Marie, I'm hearing, I really appreciate that. And think there are some places where in the recommendations themselves, we've called out that administrative burden piece. And I'm hearing and really appreciate that the way in which that belongs in the recommendation itself and the how underneath each recommendation as well. And really just in the work. Marissa?
Isn't quite a fully formed thought, but I'm thinking about the legislature being sort of the end user on this as well, and if there's an opportunity to highlight examples within the education sector in K-12 or higher education or other sectors in Massachusetts where data is then used to make funding decisions within the legislature or policy decisions, where it sort of directly impacts the decisions that are made, I should say. And then highlighting where there might be examples within some of the new data that EEC is collecting or plans that you all have in the future to kind of build up that capacity, what those opportunities might be. So recognizing both that we're like not quite there yet and we don't have the data we need to make some of those decisions, and also kind of laying out what opportunities might exist in the future or where you all are planning to collect some of that information.
Adrian, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, Marissa, I was going to say I appreciate that, and I think that's especially helpful as we think about the sort of fleshing out of these recommendations and of the report content as a whole, to think about where we can plug in some of those examples. So appreciate it. Hey, I see your comment about the data on the data on inputs, and that this is really largely data on inputs and the desire to talk about impact, child success.
I just think about,
yeah.
I mean, I know we're a long way from this, but I don't I don't think it should not appear somewhere that we need to get right now. And God love you. I think it's amazing how much is being done and how much success we've had on all of this, because God, we had no data. Back when Tom, when you were in this unfortunate seat, we didn't have any data. So now we have, like, this is really cool, no doubt. But I'm like, so when do we get to the point of saying, but are the children learning? Like, and all this good input on retention, like, where's the connection to the impact on children? So I've said enough. I always come in a little bit out of a different space, but I just wonder when we will get there, because I think we should at least mention that someday there's a goal that we will be able to look at both.
No, Kate, I really appreciate that. And I think there's a way within these recommendations to sort of integrate and build some of that in, especially in the recommendation around data gaps and thinking about how we're forward looking there. So really appreciate that. Tom?
Yeah, thank you. Kate, it may have been unfortunate that I was in the seat, but I never thought of it as an unfortunate seat.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that.
That's not why I'm responding. So I did want to maybe underscore Kate's point, and I think that's what I was trying to get at earlier with a comment, which is I think some thought, and this doesn't necessarily have to be reflected in the recommendations, but how this will ultimately be communicated, and beyond sort of this is the new capabilities that we have, and how to access it, but tying that into quality and child outcomes in a way that is meaningful and impactful to families and to the system building narrative, I think is just a enormous opportunity. So I think ensuring that there is some robust communication strategy that accompanies all of this is vital. It's so hard to get to that because getting to any of these data system improvements is in of itself a monumental achievement. And what often gets left behind is the communication strategy. It's like, you're breathless by the time the system is actually up and operating, and you've got to move on to the 5 million other things that the agency needed to do yesterday. So I would just encourage, there be a significant investment in that, because I think there's an important value to it and important impacts that could be derived.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful, and I'm grateful that I think we have many folks on our communications folks in the audience on this call, because I think it's helpful to think about what's our data and research partnership with communications and outreach to be able to talk about this work. I really appreciate that.
And sorry to jump right back in, Adrian, but I would add, I think there's a lot of public-private partnership opportunity there as well. I mean, there are all sorts of features of this that would be well supported by public-private partnership, but you have an awesome communications team. I wish I had a communications team like yours when I was there. That being said, there's limitations and demands on well, maybe I should say there's demands on too limited resources there. So I think it's a strong candidate for thought around how you might get some additional support from your external partners.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. Amy, sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, just going back to the conversation about sort of child outcomes and how kids are doing, maybe also how families are doing. I think that would also be a opportunity at an upcoming meeting for us to dive into deeper and also get some of your thoughts about sort of the future. I think we did include sort of a first pass at that in our updated research agenda, just to try to leverage some of the longitudinal data descriptively that we have across, for example, EEC and DESE and even beyond. And I think I know that's, again, something that would take resources and capacity and infrastructure for the agency to invest in, but I think it's worth more discussion among this group. And we can also obviously highlight it to some extent in this report, but just flagging that I think that is something that would be worth deeper discussion.
Pardon me if I missed it, but even in that longitudinal data, is there a sense of what metrics would be helpful to try to capture and report on that capture a sense of outcomes or impact? Are those defined, or is that part of what this group might help think through a little more?
I mean, I think, Heidi, it's both. I think as we've laid out, I think Amy's talking a little bit about some of the data sharing that we've built with our K-12 K-12 partners at DESE, and as part of those data sharing agreements, we've laid out some research questions and some outcomes. And I think it would be really helpful as part of some of these, Amy, a sort of follow-up conversation and meeting that you were talking about to do some of that thinking and work with this group too to think about what insight this group might be able to provide in terms of those research questions and approach and prioritization. etc. So Heidi, that's a really great call. Anything else either that's missing or that you would want to make sure that we sort of home in on it underneath these recommendations as we start to flesh out the report and bring this back for the group's feedback?
This is also a way for us to hold ourselves accountable for all the things we want to do. So all right, well, there will be more opportunity ahead. And again, if you realize something that you think we should include, feel free to reach out and we can update the whole commission at the next meeting. But there will also be another opportunity for you to take a look at the details in case there's anything else to add. So our next meeting is slated for the end of April. Hopefully there will be no snow on the ground. It will be very warm and sunny on that day. Again, we will be in touch in advance. And again, if any of you just have any other questions or thoughts about the research agenda more broadly, now that we've put that out, always happy to connect separately. Just really want to thank all of you also for spending the time to be here and being so engaged and constructive. Really appreciate that. And I think we have an official task, which is to approve meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was October 21st. So does somebody want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you,
Seconded.
Tom.
Seconded.
Who seconded?
Andrea Howard, second.
Thank you, Andrea. I really appreciate it. Were there any edits or anybody want to discuss anything?
Nope.
Okay. So all those in favor, if you could just say, well, how about I'll ask, are there any opposed or any who want to abstain from approving the meeting minutes? Heidi, you will abstain, I assume, because you were not there. Any other abstentions?
Yeah, I'll abstain.
Okay, great. So with that, the meeting minutes are passed and we will make sure those get posted. Thank you to folks who contributed to the minutes. Really appreciate that as well. And I think we can let everyone have a little bit of time back. So thank you so much. Please take care. Hopefully we'll see each other even before, but if not, we look forward to being back together in a couple of months.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay
Good job,
warm.
guys.
Stay safe.